Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Beards and Bitcoins, a crypto podcast for the man's man with your host BitBoy and JChains. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you're subscribed on iTunes, Spotify, or SoundCloud, and for the video version over on YouTube. If you like what you hear, leave us a comment, and please rate and review on iTunes. We sure appreciate your support. If you have any questions, or if you want to see us cover your favorite project, just shoot us over an email, info@beardsandbitcoins.com. In today's episode, we catch up with Chris DeRose. Chris is a Bitcoin evangelist. He's a public speaker, podcaster, journalist, YouTuber, and accomplished software developer. He is also a lead organizer of the South Florida Bitcoin Group. During this episode, we talk about the politics of Bitcoin, the meaning of true maximalism, and so much more. But before we jump into this week's episode, here's a quick word about our show sponsor, Monarch Wallet. Monarch Wallet is the complete crypto solution, a crypto-driven ecosystem that gives you the power to control all aspects of your financial kingdom and directly from the palm of your hand. The Monarch Wallet is the only crypto app to offer the amount of utility, functionality, security, and capability in one place for the users to easily manage all aspects of your digital assets and financial lives. So to learn more about Monarch Wallet, visit monarchtoken.io today.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Beards and Bitcoins, a crypto podcast for the man's man. Today we got very interesting guest on a little bit later for an interview. I am your co-host, BitBoy. This is your other co-host, JChains. What is going on?
What is up? What is up, dude? Living the life. The heat is on here in Texas. Literally, our air conditioning has gone out. And so, man, it's hotter than blazes. And it's just been so dang hot outside. We've had a lot of rain. It's been so humid. I know that, you guys probably get a lot of humidity in Georgia.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We typically don't. This year, it's been...
It's dry heat out there, right?
Typically, but we've had a bunch of rain, so it's got to bake out of the ground, and it has been humado. No fun.
I will say this, air conditioning is the most underrated invention in history.
Could you imagine living in a time before air conditioning?
It's insane.
Especially say you lived in Arizona. I mean, maybe whatever.
You would have been a Native American if you lived in Arizona before air conditioning, I believe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I guess were there people that lived there? I mean, I guess settlers went there. Why would you intentionally go to Arizona if there's no AC?
They said, I think back in the day, if you had allergies, same thing with Texas. I think if you had allergies and you came to these kind of locations where it's a little more dry and all that, people's allergies would just go away. Now, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they say. I always wanted a shirt that says, "Who are they?" Because people always say this. Well, who are they? Who are those people?
Yeah, nobody knows. They're the lizard people that control the world. Obviously, everyone knows that.
Yeesh.
So definitely been an interesting week. I mean, Bitcoin took a huge dip over the last week or so. I feel like people are panicking a little bit. We got a huge story about a new candidate for Satoshi, which we actually talk about with our guest today a little bit. Our guest, by the way, is Chris DeRose. You may know him from Twitter or the Chris DeRose podcast. He's been podcasting, I believe, since 2000, and I think his podcast is since 2013, maybe. But he's definitely an OG in the community for sure.
Dude knows a lot of stuff, man. I put him up there as one of those guys that when you hear him talk, I just want to listen because he's got a depth of knowledge. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So. Definitely that interview, we talk about the politics of Bitcoin. We talk about, liquidity. We talk about, what can be built on top of Bitcoin and why you may or may not want to do that. We talked about, some of the controversial tweets that he has and things like that, but we'll get into that here in a little bit in the interview. But other than that, yeah, maximalism. Maximalism is a very hot topic,
Yeah. So, I mean, some people are really, and we'll let the listeners, listen to the episode to hear what he talked about. But, it's funny, there's some people who are maxis, man, they, all they do is want to hear about Bitcoin, but then you know that they are trading other stuff. You have to, you wouldn't just, you just don't own just Bitcoin. That's not true. My hairdresser.
Some people do.
The girl that cut my hair today, a total surpriser, by the way. I got a fresh fade at the beard trim.
So good.
And so I was telling her about the podcast, and she goes, "Oh, crypto." She did like something where she paid like $150 a month to learn how to buy it and like learn all about it. I'm like,
Really?
yeah. I was like, well, it's like, because we had a conversation while she was cutting my hair the whole time, and I said, you know what? I think that you know enough now that you can stop spending that money on these classes and just spend that right into Bitcoin. And so she's just got a holding of just Bitcoin right now. We talked about the Cash App, Coinbase, and some other things, but I was totally surprised, and I'm not really sure why I went off this little tangent about my.
Did you tell her that you were a huge Bitcoin crypto celebrity?
No.
What? Did you tell her you have a podcast?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's how we came up, because I told her, I've got to get my fresh fade for my podcast. So recording, and then we talked about one of our other guests that's coming up, the guy from the World Beard Championships.
Oh yeah, I can't wait for that one.
That'd be a good one.
I got to get some tips on growing the beard. I feel like it's looking okay right now.
It is looking pretty good.
It's coming in a little bit. It's not so scraggly.
Have you been doing it? Have you been oiling or?
No, I've just been, when I go to get it trimmed, like I threw away my beard trimmer probably about 3 to 4 months ago because I couldn't find the charger. And of course, the law, the law, right? It's I throw it away and then I find the charger the next day and it's gone. Yeah, it's gone. I would have never found the charger if I wouldn't have thrown it away, but I threw it away, so I couldn't find the charger. And so I actually have not been shaving or trimming at all. I just have been going to the barber like every month, and they, shape me up or whatever. So when I've been going, I've been telling them, I want the length the same. I just want it even. So I've been making it even. So I don't know. Do you think I should dye my beard? That might be too crazy. The gray and the red is just so insane together.
The gray gives you credibility though.
Okay. I'll go with that.
Absolutely. Same thing, man. I don't trim my own beard at all. And it's for a much different reason. I'm one of those guys that if I try to trim it, it's going to all go off because I'll mess something up. I literally probably 2 or 3 times in my life have been trying to trim my own beard, and then I sneeze and then bzz, and you just cut a big divot out of there. So
have I told you my eyebrow story?
No.
Oh, you guys are going to love this. You guys are in for a treat. It is a new segment we're doing on the show that I'm debuting right now, BitBoy Story Time. So it was 2010. Okay, it was 2010. I was getting ready to leave a job and I was starting to look for another job. And I got a job interview. It was at the YMCA for being, a coordinator. Not just it was a not high level position, but kind of medium range position I was applying for. And I went into the interview and I did really well. Like the interview went very well. They told me, you know what, we want to have another interview with you where we're going to bring in all of our department heads. And these are all the people you'll be working with. And you can meet all of them, and I will be in there as well. I said, okay, great, So I go home, and the new interview with the 3 people is in like 2 or 3 days. And so I wake up that morning when it's time to go in for the interview, and my wife, we have double sync. Me and my wife, we had just been married. We've been married a year, and we had a double sync, and she was in front of one getting, doing girl things, makeup and whatnot. This is a guy's podcast. We don't do makeup. If you do, then, okay. I guess that's okay. We may not be the podcast for you. So on my side of the sink, I'm over there getting ready and I got some trimmers, and so I have my head down like this and I'm trimming my eyebrows. And I thought I had remembered I had my trimmer on a certain setting. And so I'm holding the clipper and I leaned down and I thought I had it on the right setting and I go, zoop. And I looked up and I had one eyebrow. I completely shaved my eyebrow off. It was this one. This eyebrow was completely gone. Whoop. My wife laughed so hard. Still to this day, she will tell you it was literally the funniest thing that had ever occurred. So not only do I have this job interview coming up in a couple hours, but in my old job, I was still working and was still planning on working there part-time for a little bit longer. And we had staff pictures that day too.
Oh, brutal.
So we go into work and we work in the same office, and I am facing my little cubicle and I will not move. And they're asking me questions from behind me and I won't turn around, and then finally they're like, why are you not looking at me while you're talking? And I finally turned around, like had one eyebrow, and they were like, oh my God. So it was the funniest thing ever. But more importantly, I had this other job interview and I had to make a decision. I had 3 decisions. I could either go in and try to just play off the fact that I've got one eyebrow. I can shave both eyebrows.
That's what I would do.
Or when I could also either color it in with a marker, because some girls do that. Some girls' eyebrows are actually marker. You may not know that.
Or tattoo.
I could try to get a fake one. Now I looked into the fake ones, and the fake ones were like $100, and especially at that time in my life, I could not afford a fake $100 eyebrow. So I made the decision, some may call it ballsy, to walk into an interview with someone who I just interviewed with a couple days ago and knows what I look like with one eyebrow, and have a respectable conversation with 4 people with one eyebrow pretending that I had 2. And I did it, and I got the job.
Nice, man. That's a good story.
Yeah.
So it didn't come up at all. They didn't ask you about the eyebrow.
Well, I got the job, but I ended up not taking it. So I'm sure if I would have ended up taking and accepting the job, we ended up being in some transition at that time and had moved and done some different stuff. So it didn't line up with what we were doing. When I interviewed, I thought it was, and then, later on our circumstance changed a little bit. So I'm sure that if I would have actually worked there, it would have came up and we would have talked about it. But it's weird. Like I went there, got the job, and never had to reveal to them that I, in fact, did have 2 eyebrows a couple days ago.
But you shaved it off. Man, I like that. That's a good segment. Maybe I'll do a story next time.
I got a lot of stories. But
yes,
yeah, that's still, my wife will still tell you that's the absolute funniest moment of our entire marriage, for sure. Over 10 years, that right there. She every time she talks about it, like, she just starts dying laughing. And it was crazy having one eyebrow. I mean, I had one eyebrow for like 2 weeks. It took 2 weeks for it to really grow back respectable. I mean,
was it just like after a couple of days, just like a little bit of stubble?
Yeah, I mean, it was. So when I say I shaved it off, it was equivalent of like if you do, your head shaved with no guard. So there was a little bit like you could see where it was supposed to be, which made it even weirder. Like there's some guys that don't have eyebrows. Like I don't know if you know Charlie Villanueva. He was a basketball player. Like the dude had no eyebrows, and it doesn't look that weird because like you just it looks a little off, but they don't have eyebrows. But imagine talking to someone who has eyebrows and then the next day they're missing an eyebrow. It looked absolutely insane.
Are there pictures of this?
No, thank God there are not. I don't know. We did not take the stat pictures. I told them I would not take those pictures. So
that is weird.
I can't believe we don't have a picture of that now that you're mentioning it. It's so crazy.
I'm sure your wife's got one somewhere that she just like looks at and laughs when she's.
Oh man,
when she needs a laugh.
when she needs a laugh, that's what she thinks about, for sure. So when I'm not annoying her and making her laugh just in general, So, but yeah, so I guess let's we got to talk about Monarch for a second, obviously. So I'm going to talk about a little update that they have going on, and then I'll let Chains read a little something maybe, or maybe do it off the top of the brain, either way. Monarch actually has a new user interface for their app. So make sure you guys go to the Android store, the Google store. I'm actually getting an Android phone, by the way.
Are you really?
Because there are certain dApps and games that are in crypto that require you to have an Android. So I will not be getting service on the phone. I'll be using it Wi-Fi only, but I will be getting an Android phone. So there's like my capabilities are unlimited. So I'll be downloading Monarch on that new phone when I get it to see what the user interface is on Android. With Apple specifically, I know they have a new interface. It looks great. You guys should definitely go to the App Store and download the Monarch wallet. You can find them at monarchtoken.io. That's the update for the week.
Not your keys, not your crypto. I'm sure you've heard by now that with the Monarch wallet, you own the keys to your financial castle. We're bringing the best of all crypto services in one place, the Monarch wallet. Send, store, and receive thousands of cryptocurrencies Also, qualified people can buy and sell and earn up to 7.1% interest on their crypto. The decentralized Monarch wallet has a built-in decentralized exchange, so you can quickly swap tokens right from your wallet. If that wasn't enough, it has a portfolio tracker, among many other features. Check out the website for more info today, monarchtoken.io.
Guys, we are pleased to be joined today by Chris DeRose. You might know him as a podcaster, a YouTuber, also, definitely been involved in Bitcoin for a long time, and not just investing, but has been actively involved in the community. So Chris, we're really glad to have you today.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So give us a little bit of your background, how you got, the typical questions, how you got into crypto, and, you're probably maybe have one of the longest running podcasts. I think you're taking a break right now, but one of the longest running crypto podcasts. So tell us just a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I got into the space in 2011, which makes me a fairly older-timey Bitcoiner at this point. And
we'll call you an OG. We'll call you an OG.
Sure, call me that if you like. So I got into it mostly through the Silk Road era. I was in it a little bit before Silk Road. Then when Silk Road happened, I was like, wow, this is freaking great. And then I just got all into Bitcoin. And fast forward on to today, and at this point, I guess kind of into the whole space at some level. My heart's probably in Monero at this point more than anything else, but obviously Bitcoin is great, and the scene is fun.
Yeah, so you have a lot of what I would consider to be knowledge about the politics of Bitcoin, and that's something that I feel like your average, certainly your average person invested in Bitcoin has no idea. I would say even your average content creator, whether it's podcaster or YouTuber, doesn't understand a lot of the politics behind Bitcoin, Blockstream, kind of what happened when Roger Ver split off, even though he Bitcoin Cash split off and then he followed it. But I just kind of want to get your perspective a little bit about kind of how the politics of Bitcoin have changed since you first got interested in Bitcoin.
Sure. That could be a long story or a short one. I'll give you a, yeah.
It's a deep question. I mean, certainly we don't have to hash over every single occurrence that's happened, but I do think this is fascinating, because a lot of people have no idea the stuff that happens that, goes on within the Bitcoin inner core community, I guess you could say.
Yeah, well, in the beginning, there was Bitcoin, and it was good. And over time, it became a nonstop process of, in my estimation, demographic changes, power moves, reassessments of the identity, formation of new identity groups that would be contingent on the previous identities, and on and on. I mean, it's a hard thing to summarize in brief, but I guess the way to probably say it is there was a land rush, or like an oil field rush or some such thing. And with the enthusiasm and with the potential, we saw every kind of speculator, get rich quicker, anarchist, weirdo, Tea Party conservative, libertarian, and on enter the space looking for some explanation as to what it is that's happening here, only to find an explanation, be unsatisfied with that explanation, and then proceed to change some fundamental component of the space, mostly without much success, but sometimes with success. That I guess is the general overview. Very 10,000 foot interview.
Yeah. So obviously, like, one of the biggest changes that happened in the history of Bitcoin would have been when Satoshi, which we'll talk in a little bit later on about kind of a new revelation we may have had about Satoshi, but when Satoshi basically handed off Bitcoin to Gavin Anderson, right? And Gavin Anderson was, at that point, I don't know exactly what the timing was from the creation of the Bitcoin Foundation and the creation of Blockstream, or Blockstream taking over Bitcoin, which is Gavin Anderson, I believe, is the CEO of Blockstream. Would that be his position?
I don't know, actually. I don't think he is. I thought that changed at some point.
It may have.
Yeah.
But
looking it up now.
Okay, cool. So the long and the short of it is, at some point, Satoshi passed off the reins to Gavin Anderson, who, like I said, was one of the founding Bitcoin Foundation members. And what kind of, could you assess kind of like a change that happened at that point? How would you summarize the change from where Satoshi was in charge of Bitcoin to handing it off to someone who we actually know?
A lot of that was actually before my time, but the way it kind of worked, if I remember right, off the top of my head, was that Satoshi started working with Marty Malmy, who's an unsung hero in the space, I would say. Then from there, I think Marty Malmy either turned it over to Gavin, I thought, something like that. I think that if someone who's watching this is probably swearing up and down right now because I got that wrong. But it didn't go straight to Gavin, if I remember right. But it went to Gavin pretty soon thereafter, and that was a major change, I think, in certainly a lot of the development process of Bitcoin, certainly.
Yeah. So Blockstream is now in charge of the development of Bitcoin, and I think for your average person, they have no idea what Blockstream is. They have no idea what they do, and they have no idea, what kind of approval process people have to go through to kind of make changes in the Bitcoin code. I guess first, why would someone want to make changes to the Bitcoin code? Because I think people think they hear Bitcoin, they think immutable ledger, they think blockchain, they think it shouldn't be changed. But obviously, Bitcoin does go through changes. So why would Bitcoin need to have some of this code changed?
All right, right into the heart of the politics here. Let's get into it.
Chris, I know that on your Twitter, you're a quite controversial figure on Twitter, as I'm sure you know, and I think the last time I was around you in person would have been when we were in Litecoin, the Litecoin Summit. And I was hearing you talk about all these things about the politics, and it was going all over my head because I didn't know any of it. So since then, I've done some searching, I've done some looking, and I've kind of hit some dead ends and some things. And I really want to get it. I really want to understand more on your level about what's happening with the politics of Bitcoin. So let's get right into it, to the thick of it. Some of this stuff is quite controversial.
Yeah, so I don't know that it's exactly accurate to say that Blockstream is the primary interest group in the construction of Bitcoin, though it might be, but I don't know if that's necessarily certain. There's some ambiguity there. There's this very strange, I can get into this at multiple levels as well, but there's this very strange phenomenon here where it seems that the Bitcoin movement turned from a protocol into a faith-based movement of some kind, which itself isn't necessarily unusual. I think the dollar did the same thing. I think all currencies generally do, and that's probably even healthy enough. However, in the case of Bitcoin, it seemed that the faith was predicated on this no leaders or anarchy movement that was, I think, more popular at around 2013, probably.
Decentralization in its purest form.
Well, that would be the idea, yeah. And that kind of itself is a bit strange because I don't know that decentralization necessarily means that, but it certainly might. If you ask 1,000 people what decentralization means, you'll get 1,000 different answers. It's very similar to freedom in that sense. What is freedom? And you'll get all these answers. And they're like these Schelling points in our culture that represent some affinity or some value that is an ideal, oftentimes, that coagulates the population around this goal. We see this historically many, many times where there's some notion, oftentimes religious, oftentimes heritage-based. And I guess here in the space, it was this no leaders thing. Right. The no leaders probably arose as a result of the libertarian demographic being as, how to put it, regulation averse, I would say. The anarchist as well being no leaders oriented. And I guess this decentralization theme as well, probably. So it all kind of correlated in this coalesced to this no leaders thing. But that's not in any way, shape, or form true. Bitcoin has many leaders, and to deny it is perverse to me. It shows the madness of crowds and popular and the power of popular delusions. I think that you could have such a goal become the de-risked form of, I guess, virtue or achievement, as was professed, at least around here in blockchain. So you had, and funny enough, you had people who were proselytizing the virtues of sound money, which was defined by having no programmers, and then also, I guess, having this sort of willed ignorance about the mutation of the code that was actively going on. And in a lot of ways, like that's a fairly theocratic kind of idea, I think. We sort of saw, along with this zeal and zealotry and faith, this ignorance, which is the ignorance that the code is never adjusted. It was more important, I think, to people in this space to either accrue social capital or to perform like the voodoo dance than it was to reflect any notion of truth or even observation and evidence. And as a result, it seems that the people who could best articulate a case for denialism or ignorance were thrust into the spotlight as channeling the will or the general will of the crowd. And for me, it was perverse at first, although now I find it hilarious. And that's part of what we see here. Like you can see Saifedean Ammous, who has built his Bitcoin career off this notion of the unprogrammed Bitcoin that can't be programmed. Meanwhile, updating his Bitcoin node at the same time. Now, I think from like a more philosophical standpoint, that might be labeled the postmodern condition. And we can get into that perhaps if you like. But it demonstrates how humans will operate on these like planes of cognition, which are mutually exclusive and should intersect, but never will. So like in this case, he has the plane of cognition that is Bitcoin never changes, along with the plane of cognition that is here's how I update my Bitcoin code, and there's no bridge between that. They never intersect in his mind.
But clearly, they are intersecting in real life.
Correct. Yes. And yes. Yeah. In the observable world. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's so much. Like here's the thing. So let's go back a little bit to where you were talking about the ambiguity of Blockstream. Now, Blockstream itself has developers that work there. And then there are developers that work on Bitcoin, but some of those people are the same people. And I think there's like an argument that like Blockstream technically isn't supposed to be in control of Bitcoin, I think, right? But because the developers that are developing Bitcoin work for Blockstream, it is like kind of a way of centralizing. Is that, do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, centralizing is sort of at this point, it's just rhetoric, honestly. I don't know what it means. Yeah. So like anything can be said to be centralized or said to be decentralized, depending on the willingness of the audience to engage in, I don't know, magical thinking in all likelihood. I mean, you have to consider like at the heart of Bitcoin is this contradiction that Bitcoin has no authority, but meanwhile, there is necessarily some necessary standard that is Bitcoin. And rather than, whereas other protocols like HTML, for example, would have had a spec, Bitcoin didn't go that route. Bitcoin has instead gone the route of the implementation is the spec, which is a de facto form of decree by a single organization and probably by a single developer, quite frankly. And so in any case, you can ignore that.
Isn't that kind of dangerous though? Like that's dangerous, right? I mean, if we have really kind of one guy that's making the calls that, you know, who knows?
Thus far, it hasn't been. Like thus far, you know, if it was dangerous, I don't know. Like this notion that like having no one in charge is good is very nebulous to me. It seems like if you have no one in charge, then everything is a Bitcoin, and or there is no way for specialists to have outsized influence on the design of Bitcoin. And there's a bunch of other things that go along with it. The passions of the madness lead the crowd, as opposed like to the tempered consideration of the commanding body. We kind of have the worst of both worlds in some senses here, because like in Bitcoin, we not only have a agency that steers opinion and code, but we also have a mob that denies the agency's existence. So in many ways, it resembles like I think early theocratic forms of government, where like God channels the protocol, not the priests, and the priests merely tell you what God sees. That's kind of what we have here in Bitcoin. We're like, wouldn't you know it? Everybody just magically consents on this idea of take anything, like SegWit or I don't know, the block size or what have you. That delusion that everyone consents on this thing emergently is perhaps more compelling to people than an edict was offered from a trusted source, which would be the core developers.
And I think that this, when you're talking about this mob, like that's something I feel like I've been encountering a lot with people that talk about that are especially the hardline maximalists, like they talk about Bitcoin like it's an entity. Like Bitcoin itself is a thing, and you see Pomp say this all the time. Like I love Pomp. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying anything bad about Pomp. He's been on the show, but whatever, this Bitcoin doesn't care about this. Like, well, Bitcoin's not a thing. Like Bitcoin's not a person. Like Bitcoin doesn't think on its own.
Doesn't have.
It's a god. It's a god. It's like saying the honey badger does. I mean, it's like Zeus don't care about. You'll notice that a lot of the ways in which the madness of crowds or any group of like incited mob works is generally around these themes of like superpowers. So like Bitcoin, proper noun, agency on its own, very, very much like a stand-in for God and representation of the mind of the person who says it, I would suggest. Zeus don't care about this. Nike don't care about that. Bitcoin
especially as we move more towards, a godless society, not speaking for myself.
100%. Absolutely. That's
we move towards
very
that. Like,
well said.
Yeah, there's a need to latch on to something somewhere, and so I feel like a lot of people, like when you hear the hardline maximalists talk about Bitcoin, they really do talk about it in that light. And I guess that leads me to, kind of the next thing I want to talk about, which is, I talk to Bitcoin maximalists. I know one very closely, and, good friends. Like we can talk about ideas and it's fine. But, in a lot of these conversations I had, especially at Consensus, when I was, at the Block 1 party, or not Block 1, that would have been an EOS party, the Block Party, I guess you could say. I talked to a few maximalists, some that maybe people would recognize on Twitter, and I kept getting the same question from them, which was, what's the use case of altcoin X, and what can it do that Bitcoin cannot do? And the argument is that anything can be built on top of Bitcoin. Any altcoin application, whether it's smart contracts or anything like that, can be built on top of Bitcoin. And so I want to know your perspective on that. Do you think Bitcoin is the end all be all and that everything can just be built on top of it? And then I guess the second part of that would be, if that's the case, then, what does that kind of look like for the future of cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is there are no Bitcoin maximalists. That is a dead movement, which might sound a bit egregious, but you should consider that the history of Bitcoin maximalism started either with me or somebody, with my co-host at the time, or certainly with people around me, and it was a coined thing. And if you look at the neologism,
I had no idea. That's very interesting.
Yeah, so Vitalik coined this with a very specific definition. And then, like many things in the recent years, it blockchained in the sense that the definition became increasingly vacuous as people found it easier to redefine a word than to comply with the definition. Until now, if you look back at the original definition, what you'll find is that nobody who's a maximalist complies with that definition. So what happened there, I would suggest, is that you had a demographic which were really like adhered mostly through snobbery, or at least like in-group elitism, I would say. Of like the true form of the cryptocurrency person. And the tenets that the group had was almost entirely irrelevant. It was mostly a matter of like who their friends were. And if their friends said they were this thing, then they were. But the original definition said it was morally repugnant, effectively, to have anything but BTC. But lo and behold, ask every single maximalist at this point what else you have bought and sold and what has made you money or what you hold. And they'll all have this like very hilariously dismissive, like, wow, this doesn't count. It's like, no, that thing actually means you are not a maximalist. You just defeated the entirety of whatever you thought.
Money, I like to trade, that's
right.
What
Yeah. Right, but that's no longer maximalism. That they're in-group maximalists is what I would suggest. If you don't know what in-groups, out-groups are, it's worth looking into. Bitcoin maximalism is just in-group maximalism. They are steadfast and solidly with the in-group, whatever the in-group might be that particular year. It's also, should be said, very much a group held together by disgust. If you have a low disgust ratio, you will find yourself a maximalist. So it's a bit, in my mind, disingenuous to say that the people with a low disgust tolerance are maximalists, but that is generally the adherent quality you will find in these adherents, is that they won't tolerate things. They are effectively intolerant, and anything that is deviant is disgusting. So that's kind of what like maximalism has become, and that's really dumb, if you ask me. But they're welcome to challenge this. Usually they block me very quickly, and
they do not like you.
Yeah, I mean, because like facts are disgusting. Like that's the deal.
Yeah.
That's what makes them facts. And I'm sorry, but like broccoli is good for you. It tastes bad, but that's why it's good for you. Working out is good for you. I'm sorry, it's annoying to go to the gym, but yes, that's what's good for you. And so like, you know, you find yourself in these rooms effectively of children who don't want to be told that they have to like do their homework. And then you tell them to do the homework and then they block you for being annoying. And it's like, okay, well, I guess you don't have to do your homework, but that just means I'll take your money, which is what happens now.
Yeah.
In any case, like in
Well,
most
people don't like being told. People don't like being told that you're in, you are in a group and you'll do whatever that group says. People like to think that they have independent thought, and so I think when you start to group them and say there's no more maximalists or this or that, they want to fight against that because it would be like, well, I'm the outlier here, but in reality, like I read stuff you say, and like a lot of stuff you say, I don't agree with every single thing you've ever said. I mean, that would be disingenuous, but in general, like I kind of line up with a lot of stuff. I do think it's all about a narrative, it's all about a narrative, what Bitcoin is, what it's about, what the future is. It's like being in a club, that really is what it is, So,
yeah.
I mean, JChains has a motorcycle club. There's 2 members, but he's in a club, but I do
everybody wants to be in a club.
Yeah. And so the club itself and what the club stands for is more important than what is actually happening. Like, I think that's probably a good way to sum it up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, your question was, I think, regarding more specifically, like to the maximalist claim that this other token either could be better achieved with Bitcoin's functionality or some such thing. And like addressing that point to me, my easy answer is that the technology is completely irrelevant, which is a bit sobering and unfortunate in many ways. But I think currently, if you look at the non-speculative consumption of these tokens, it's close to zero. It is entirely a matter of speculation, which I don't think is a bad thing even, but it means that the technicals are literally irrelevant. And we can like talk about that maybe if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about it. I mean, I would make the argument that there's some things out there being used. Basic attention token is one. I mean, Brave Browser's done, very, very well. I mean, and then, outside of privacy coins, outside of coins that are literally currency, like those are obviously all serving their own. When we were talking about utility tokens and things like that, like I can point to a few, I would think, that are actually doing something. But I mean, yeah, the vast majority of the market is speculative. And I've said that I believe that in the next bull run, Cardano is going to do phenomenal because it has no product and it has nothing to nitpick. Like we've got Tron and Ethereum, you can nitpick stuff about it. I mean, they work, but like with some of these that don't have anything, it's what are you going to nitpick,
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a very fair point. Well, I mean, let's take a token. Which one do you think is a very well used one right now?
I mean, the first one and only one that really comes to my mind that's being used, actually, I would say basic attention token,
Okay. So when's the last time you used basic attention token?
I received them for tips on my page, on my channel. That's pretty much it. I mean, I get them obviously I get referrals when people download it from my link in my video description and stuff, but I actually have tipped. I've used it to tip other people. I've done it on my channel, on live streams and things like that. So the tipping mechanism, I guess, is really what the use case is right now. Now, you can also watch ads through the Brave browser and earn the tokens, but I've never done that.
Okay, so yeah, so I think what you've communicated to me, as I've understood it, is probably less to the effect that you've spent the token in any utilitarian sense. It seems that you've used it, at least in the utilitarian sense, as a form of currency, which I think is a very like steadfast and very real utility for these offerings. But I don't know that it's entirely fair to say that you've like burned the BAT token or consumed it per its original intent. It generally seems to be the case that the function of these tokens is in fact liquidity and liquidity alone. So like very few people will be burning BAT, is my suspicion, or buying BAT is either to run their website or to improve their browsing experience, save for the functions that a currency would provide. And that's true of like Ethereum. It's true largely of Steemit, I would say. Steemit might even be an exception. I don't know about that, but there's not many exceptions. And when there are exceptions, you're talking about a user number that's like very, very low. Certainly, relative to competing technologies that don't use tokens. And that's okay, by the way. But but that I think points to the technicals being irrelevant. If liquidity is in fact the product, then there's really no reason Bitcoin's better than anything else, other than the degree to which it facilitates liquidity. And then you end up with, in my assessment at least, a conversation about the first mover advantage, which is fine. It has that. But advantages are not guaranteed. So like that needs to be considered too. It's not the first mover guarantee, it's the first mover advantage. So
Ethereum has first movers advantage on decentralized platforms, but I believe it will get past one day, because I think there will be better ones that rise up.
Sure. I mean, again, there's, in my estimation, very little to do with the technology. So a better one would be whichever one attracts the greatest amount of fools, and generally that would be like whoever produces the most extravagant claims, which is kind of like what you generally see as like a theme. So like Bitcoin was very rote. Then you had a number of things between Bitcoin and then Ethereum, but Ethereum kind of really stepped it up and said, well, not only can we do this, but we can also run all the applications in the world without servers or something. And so because the nature of that pitch was extraordinary, that created a greater amount of liquidity in that particular offering than most. So it received a return. And then EOS comes along, and then it's Ethereum 2.0, and it can do everything Ethereum can do plus 10x. And like that, in my estimation, would be the nature of a lot of these products going forward. We'll see. But
yeah. So let me see if I can summarize kind of what your answer to that question is. Basically, Bitcoin could do what any of these other ones do. It could be built up, layers on top of it. However, there's really no point to it. And, I would add on my perspective also that, there's so much money behind these other companies and these other projects and platforms that alone will keep it driving forward. There's no reason really to build everything on top of Bitcoin. Like, what do you think that is kind of your perspective on as well?
Well, I don't. It's pretty close. I mean, I would say that like there really is no reason to build. Even I take it one step further. So like, there's very few things that have been produced that have offered a market advantage. Very few, and so it's more about the presentation. And so,
but you don't feel like, do you not feel though that like that's where we're at right now? But in 5 to 10 years, I mean, if you would have gone back to, like, we'll say the internet, that's obviously the example that everybody uses for everything, in comparison to cryptocurrency. I mean, in the 80s, like, yeah, there were networks, like the internet was there, but there was no way to really, use it. And then eventually Netscape came along and kind of tied it all together. And I can kind of see that with dApps, with decentralized applications. Like, number one, there's a huge reaction going on right now in the world to censorship. Like, we're being censored everywhere on social media. Our privacy is being stolen, so, arguing the definition of the word decentralization aside, like, there's a reason to have things that we actively use that are not doing those things, that are not censoring us, and that are not, buying and selling us as commodities, or our data as commodities. So like, if there's something that comes together that's able to tie together all the decentralized applications to where we have decentralized social media and it's usable, because right now it's not usable really, like, and they don't have the popularity that obviously Facebook or Twitter enjoys. Like, you can't see a day where that will matter and those things will, be used. I think that's the biggest question mark in all of crypto, I believe.
Right. So the two things I would respond to that. Number one, why don't we have that already then? In the sense that, like, we do have these sort of technology. We've had blockchain in the effective definition as of now for 30 years, I would say, or more. Oh. Meaning the definition of blockchain that was around from 2008 to 2012, yeah, that was new. But then as the definition changed to, I guess, like, I'll use Facebook as a perfect example of that. Facebook is, last I heard, their cryptocurrency offering now is a blockchain. But everything I've seen from this is technology that's been around since AOL days, or even before. So then the question, why don't we have like dApps per this definition? Or like, is it that we are already in the dApp utopia? And I would say, like, yeah, we are already here in the dApp utopia per the definition of blockchain that's conventionally used now. So there's nothing about Facebook that isn't decentralized at this point. And then the question is, so then why doesn't Facebook post uncensorable YouTube videos? And that's a good question. And we can ask why. There's a bunch of easy answers, but I'm a little bit, what I think is I'm seeing happening right now is the regulators are getting wise. The international politics are getting very constrained. Like that's a very onerous and deep issue. And so I don't see that the regulatory functions that most of these currencies have promised are able to be delivered, particularly given the state of community management. So there might have been a route where some notion of community inclusion happened, and the maximalists were the kind, nice people that everybody wanted to play with online. That did not come to pass. So instead, we have fragmentation and a lack of community focus. And when I look at projects like Tor or BitTorrent, and then I compare it to like any of the crypto projects, it seems as if we are weakened easily without much power, and probably unable to deliver a lot of the quote unquote like 2012 definition of decentralized solutions that we originally claimed to offer. So that may change, but I'm a little bearish on that, fortunately. Though, as a quick aside, some of the most decentralized successes are completely unheralded right now. So like Mastodon is killing it, I think, in terms of like decentralization achievement, as is BitChute. And both of those operate without any token of any kind, and Tor probably as well. So it's in the ways that decentralization has been heralded in the past, we have achieved some degree of success by foregoing blockchain, and that's the way it is. Maybe we'll see.
So do you think that crypto is really just a giant money grab?
Oh, I know it's a giant money grab, but I don't think it's just that. Like
Do you think it will at some point, or do you think it's a possibility of an eternal money grab?
Well, we all hope it's eternal. I don't know if it will be. Yeah. I mean, liquidity is a product. That's the deal. And what's interesting here is we have in the modern world, I'm studying this very hard even right now. And I don't have good answers. I don't think anybody does, but we have this sort of like ability to, I think, manipulate cognition in a way that we've never had before. It used to be that in order to program humans, you had to really go through a lot of hoops to do that. You needed to get authorization from like an FCC, and you had to run like a television network with a startup cost of, I guess $1 billion. But now here you are, you're doing this.
I'm doing it right.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And so like that's really new. And as part of that effect, it seems that what we're able to do is, things like not know a rose by any other name times 1,000. So in this particular case here, bring that back to the applied sense. If enough people call ones and zeros a rock, it seems that the regulators will believe it's a rock. And we've seen that in the form of like the CFTC offering to regulate these ones and zeros, which is fairly unprecedented. I think that they've regulated like carbon offsets, maybe. That would be the only other time that they've done this. And you see also like the SEC believing that this is some kind of commodity and not a security of any kind. So like that's really interesting. And yeah. I don't think that's something we should be like dismissing. That's like, it's unfortunately, if we were better organized, it shows that we could actually do a lot of the stuff we want to do. But because we have these like strange mystics amongst us who seem to lead the deranged and the I guess the gullible, we aren't very organized, and so instead we just
we have 7,000 different tokens. So everybody split between what they want to. Obviously the majority of people would be towards the top. Well, definitely appreciate your thoughts on all that. Before we go, definitely want to ask you about story that broke this week about Paul Solatoshi, Calder LaRue, possibly being Satoshi. He's in prison. He's a government informant. Could tie together some loose ends between him, Craig Wright, or between Satoshi, Craig Wright, and Dave Kleiman. Want to get your thoughts on this story and what you think. I guess that's the same thing. Your thoughts.
Yeah, we have like this sort of quasi-election process that we do every few years, where we elect a new Satoshi to be the one that represents perhaps the real Satoshi. I don't know, but this Satoshi is a good Satoshi. There are things about this Satoshi that I like. I think his how to put it, his spirit as the rebel is something that I like a lot. It's a little bit perhaps more in line with the spirit that I came here for. His pedigree checks out too. He is a cryptographer who's delivered subversive solutions in the past, and in ways that I think check out with the Satoshi story. Not only in the ways that the media is reporting currently, but even some of my own like unofficial metrics. I really would love to see the TrueCrypt source code, and it's been on the list of things to look into to see if anybody has that. Is like TrueCrypt version 0001 source code available? Does anybody know? If you're watching this, let me know. What we would look out for are some of like the Satoshi hallmarks. So like carriage returns after functions that are like 3 or 4 carriage returns on average. And a few other things in terms of like the coding style that I don't remember off the top of my head. But we were looking for something like that. Yeah, it also, he's a Windows dev, which was good because the first Satoshi release was Windows code. And there's a few other things like, I like that his pedigree is roughly British, or he has like a British intersection, because there's a very strong case to be made that whoever like the real Satoshi is, he has a British pedigree, not only in his style.
I've said no American ever has used the word bloody.
Or shunt. Shunt is the other one. Shunt is a smoking gun. If you look at the leaked Satoshi code from like November before the January release, the comments in that code used a couple of things that were notable and different. One of which was time chain as opposed to blockchain, and the other was the word shunt, which is a very rare word to be used in general. Yeah. And it seems like this person would either know what shunt is or have said shunt. So for me, like these are good positive indicators that makes him a good candidate. We'll see what the next Satoshi candidate is, but this one is encouraging. I like this one.
Well, JChains and I are both from the South. I mean, I know you live in Florida, but that doesn't count as the South, as we all know. And I think he's from Texas. I'm from Georgia, the Atlanta area. So we say shunt all the time. Like, hey, you shunt and go out there and get that out of the car. You shunt and go out there in the dark. It's scary.
I knew some kind of crazy joke was coming out of that.
I knew it had to be coming, but it's true. I do know people that probably use it that way. Of course, we know that's not actually what they're saying. But yeah, in spelling of defense with a C and color with a OU, like those are definitely British hallmarks. Maybe Australian from what some people have said. I don't even know about that necessarily, but I know in America, if we're talking bloody, we're talking steak. That's the only thing we're talking about. So, well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on. It's been very, very insightful. It's going to take me like 3 days to really process everything you said. What about you, JChains?
Man, I didn't say a word, really. I was taking a lot of notes, man. It was good to learn from you. One of the things that you said that I really did like and really kind of puts a new spin on it is that liquidity is a product. I think that says something right there. I like that. So I wrote that one down.
Yeah, run with it. Great.
Cool.
So that means, JChains, let's start up a liquidity merch shop.
You got it.
So we'll have liquidity mugs for y'all before the end of the
I'm just going to sell a bunch of liquidity.
Okay. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you guys later. Well, I guess first, tell people where they can find you real quick. Sorry about that.
ChrisDeRose.com or DeRose on Twitter.
Cool. And we'll post some links so that people can, if they want to find your stuff, they can click right to you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you so much.
Good chatting with you.
Well, guys, that certainly was an interesting interview with Chris DeRose. One of the main reasons why I wanted to have him on the channel is because these are a lot of questions I'm exploring myself and trying to figure out the politics of cryptocurrency, not in a sense of Republican or Democrat or Libertarian, but really what goes on behind the scenes. Who are the decision makers? I think if this is something we're investing our whole lives into, which as a content creator in cryptocurrency, I know I am. I'm investing everything in crypto, not just financially, but my time, my family, my future. Everything right now for me depends on cryptocurrency. I want to know who are the decision makers when it comes to changing code for Bitcoin. What is the future of cryptocurrency? What is the future of utility tokens? What's going to happen when, there may be a bubble that pops? I think these are all interesting questions to explore. So definitely appreciate Chris coming on the podcast and talking about those things. Make sure you guys to subscribe to us on YouTube, the Beards and Bitcoins YouTube channel, as well as review us on iTunes. You may not know this, but they say iTunes is actually going away. They will have a specific podcast only section or app coming soon. They already do have the podcast app, but it's going to be more expansive in the future. So definitely be on the lookout for that whenever that happens from Apple and we have to maybe relaunch on that platform. So make sure you guys are reviewing us anywhere you can review us. Subscribe to the channel. You can find Chris DeRose at DeRose. That is his Twitter handle. You can find the Beards and Bitcoins Twitter handle at Beards Bitcoins. Thank you guys so much for watching. We will talk to you guys later.